The old blood bank stood at the corner of Ashford Street, where the streetlights flickered and the autumn wind carried whispers of something ancient. It was a building forgotten by time, its brick facade weathered to the color of dried roses, its windows clouded with decades of city grime. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed their tired songs, and the linoleum floors bore the scuff marks of countless footsteps, most belonging to people desperate enough to trade pieces of themselves for grocery money. Elena Vasquez had been coming here for 3 years. 26 years old, with dark hair that fell past her shoulders and eyes the color of strong coffee, she had learned early that survival meant sacrifice. Her mother's medical bills had taught her that lesson first. Then came the eviction notices, the jobs lost, the meals skipped. The blood bank paid $40 per donation. $40 bought rice, beans, electricity for another week. $40 was the difference between drowning and treading water. She sat in the worn vinyl chair, her sleeve rolled up, watching the needle find its familiar path into her vein. The phlebotomist, a tired woman named Margaret who had seen too many desperate faces, worked with mechanical efficiency. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. What Elena did not know, could not have known, was that her blood carried something extraordinary. Not a disease, not an anomaly that would appear on any medical test. It carried an echo, a resonance of something impossibly old, something that had been waiting for centuries to find its way home. 30 miles north of the city, past the suburban sprawl, and into the deep woods where the roads turned to gravel and then to nothing at all, stood a manor house that appeared on no map. It had been there for 400 years, though its architecture seemed to shift with the centuries, Gothic spires giving way to Victorian flourishes, then to a stark modernist restoration that had been the previous century's attempt at discretion. The house was called Ashworth, though none remained who remembered why. Within its walls, in a chamber that had once been a ballroom and now served as a shrine to medical science, a boy lay dying. He was not a boy in the way that humans understood the word. Sebastian Ashworth was 93 years old, though his body had frozen at 17, the age at which the curse had taken hold, the age at which his father had tried and failed to save him from a fate worse than death. For 9 decades he had existed in a twilight state, neither fully vampire nor fully mortal, his cells caught in an endless war between transformation and rejection. His father stood at the window, watching the moon rise over the forest. Victor Ashworth was 1,200 years old. He had been a prince once, in a kingdom whose name had been forgotten by history. He had watched empires rise and crumble, had walked through plagues and wars, had buried more loves than he could bear to count. But nothing. Not the fall of Constantinople, not the Black Death, not the 2 world wars that had ravaged the continent of his birth, had wounded him like watching his son waste away, year after year, decade after decade. The new shipment arrived, said a voice from the doorway. Dr. Helena Frost was human, one of the few who knew the truth about the Ashworth family. She had been in their employ for 30 years, aging gracefully while her patient remained forever young and forever dying. I've begun the analysis. Victor did not turn from the window. And there's one sample that's different. Her voice carried a tremor that he had learned to recognize, not fear, but the particular vibration of hope trying not to announce itself too loudly. The markers are unlike anything I've seen. If I didn't know better, I'd say it. I'd say it carries the old blood, the bloodline we thought had died out 3 centuries ago. Now Victor turned. In the pale light, his face might have been carved from marble, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes the color of winter ice that had seen too much to ever truly warm again. He was beautiful in the way that ancient things are beautiful, terrifying and sublime, a reminder of what humanity had worshipped before it learned to call such worship sin. The Valdres line, he said. It was not a question. I can't be certain without further testing, but the resonance is there. If this blood could be used for the transfusion, find them. Victor's voice was soft, but it carried the weight of centuries. Find whoever this blood belongs to. Bring them to me. He did not say please. Creatures like Victor had long ago abandoned such courtesies. But Dr. Frost understood the desperation beneath the command, the raw wound of a father who had spent 90 years watching his child die by inches. And if they don't want to come, Victor's silence was answer enough. The room that served as Sebastian's sick room had once hosted dancing and laughter, chandelier light catching on silk gowns and champagne glasses. Now it held only the soft beeping of monitors, the gentle hiss of oxygen, and the boy himself, pale as paper, his dark hair spread across the pillow like spilled ink, his chest rising and falling, with the labored rhythm of a heart that could not decide whether to beat or to stop. Victor sat beside him in the hours before dawn, as he did every night. He held his son's cold hand and remembered the day Sebastian had been born, the joy that had seemed impossible for a creature who had long forgotten joy. Sebastian's mother had been human, a woman named Catherine who had loved Victor despite knowing what he was, or perhaps because of it. She had died in childbirth, her mortal body unable to survive the strain of carrying a child that was half something else. "I should have let you go," Victor whispered to his sleeping son. "I should have let you die mortal, as she did. But I was selfish. I am always selfish." Sebastian's eyes fluttered, but did not open. In his dreams, perhaps, he walked in sunlight. In his dreams, perhaps, he was whole. The curse had been Victor's own doing. When Sebastian had contracted tuberculosis at 17, a common enough death sentence in that era, Victor had tried to turn him, to grant him the immortality that would save his life. But the transformation had gone wrong. Sebastian's blood had carried something of his mother's humanity that the curse could not overcome. And the result was this endless limbo, not alive enough to heal, not dead enough to stop suffering. For 90 years, Victor had searched for a cure. He had consulted witches and warlocks, scientists and madmen. He had traveled to the ends of the earth and into realms that existed only in the spaces between. He had done terrible things, things that haunted him still, that added to the weight of centuries that pressed upon his shoulders like stones. All for nothing, all for a boy who remained frozen between worlds, waiting for a salvation that never came, until now. Until a blood sample from a forgotten blood bank carried the echo of something he had thought lost forever. The Valdres line, the old blood, the bloodline that had once been allies to his kind, humans whose blood carried properties that could heal even the most grievous wounds. They had been hunted to extinction 300 years ago, victims of a purge that Victor himself had failed to prevent. He had mourned them as he mourned all the lost things of the world, with the numb acceptance of one who had seen too much death to feel its sting anymore. But if someone remained, if the blood had survived, hidden in the veins of a descendant who did not know what she carried, then perhaps there was hope after all. Perhaps his son could finally be saved. Elena was walking home from her shift at the diner when they found her. She worked 3 jobs, the blood bank, the diner, and overnight cleaning at an office building downtown. And she was tired in a way that had become so familiar she barely noticed it anymore. Tired was just how life felt. Tired was the price of keeping the lights on and the landlord at bay. The black car pulled up beside her just as she turned onto Maple Street. It was the kind of car she had only seen in movies, sleek and expensive, its windows tinted so dark she could not see inside. When the rear door opened, she should have run. Every survival instinct she possessed screamed at her to run. But the woman who emerged was not threatening. She was middle-aged with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing the kind of professional attire that spoke of hospitals and laboratories. She smiled, and the smile was tired in a way that Elena recognized, the tiredness of someone who had seen too much suffering and kept going anyway. "Elena Vasquez?" the woman asked. "Who's asking?" "My name is Dr. Helena Frost. I'm a researcher, and I've been studying blood disorders for many years. Your recent donation at the Ashford Street Clinic came to my attention. There's something in your blood that could help save a young man's life." Elena's hand tightened on her bag. "I'm nobody, just a girl trying to make rent." "I know," Dr. Frost's voice was gentle. "I know how hard you've worked, how much you've sacrificed. I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here to offer you a choice." "What kind of choice?" "Come with me, meet the patient. If you choose not to help after that, I'll bring you home and you'll never hear from us again. But if you choose to help, if you're willing to donate more blood under controlled conditions, we can pay you, enough to change your life." Elena should have said no. She knew the shape of traps, the way promises turned to prisons. But something in Dr. Frost's eyes, the desperate hope, the bone-deep weariness, spoke to something in Elena's own soul. "How much?" she heard herself ask. $50,000, more if the treatment requires multiple donations. $50,000, enough to pay off her mother's medical debt. Enough for a security deposit on an apartment that didn't have mold in the walls, enough to breathe. "Show me," Elena said. The drive took over an hour. Elena watched the city lights fade, replaced by suburbs, then farmland, then forest, so thick it seemed to swallow the road. She asked questions, but Dr. Frost's answers were vague. A rare condition, an experimental treatment, a family that preferred privacy. By the time the manor house appeared through the trees, Elena had begun to suspect that she had made a terrible mistake. The house was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. It rose from the forest like something from a fairy tale, all stone walls and ivy, windows that glowed with warm light against the darkness. But beneath the beauty, she sensed something else, something old, something watching. "What is this place?" she whispered. "Home," said Dr. Frost, "for those who live here anyway." The interior was a study in contrasts, ancient architecture filled with modern technology, oil paintings hanging beside medical monitors, Persian rugs soft beneath sterile equipment. Elena followed Dr. Frost through hallways that seemed to go on forever, past rooms filled with books and rooms filled with shadows, until they reached a set of double doors. "The patient is through here," Dr. Frost said. "His father will want to speak with you first. I should warn you, he can be intense, but he means no harm. He's just a father trying to save his child." Elena nodded, though her heart was pounding. She had faced worse than intense. She had faced eviction notices and collection calls, had faced her mother's slow decline and the doctor's apologetic shrugs. She could face this. The doors opened onto a room that might have been beautiful once, before it became a shrine to illness. Medical equipment crowded the space, surrounding a bed where a figure lay, motionless. But Elena's attention was caught by the man standing at the window, tall and still, dressed in black, his face turned toward the moon. When he turned to look at her, she forgot to breathe. He was the most beautiful man she had ever seen. Beautiful and terrible, like a storm, like a blade. His eyes were pale gray, and they held centuries. She could see it, somehow, the weight of ages pressing behind that gaze. He looked at her the way one might look at a ghost or a miracle. "You carry the old blood," he said. His voice was deep and soft, accented with something she could not place. "I can smell it from here. I don't know what that means." "No, you wouldn't." He moved toward her, and every instinct screamed at her to run, but she held her ground because running had never saved her from anything. "Your ancestors were healers, special. Their blood could cure wounds that no medicine could touch. I thought they were all dead. I thought that hope had died with them." Elena's mouth was dry. "Who are you?" "My name is Victor Ashworth, and the boy in that bed is my son." She looked past him to the figure on the bed. In the dim light, she could see only pale skin, dark hair, the gentle rise and fall of a chest that seemed too still. "What's wrong with him?" "A condition that has no name in your medical books. He has been dying for 90 years. Your blood, the blood of your ancestors, is the only thing that might save him." 90 years, Elena repeated. The words made no sense. "He looks like a teenager. He was when the sickness took him. He has not aged since, cannot age, cannot heal, cannot die." Victor's voice cracked on the last word, and in that crack, Elena heard something that shattered her fear. She heard grief, the raw, impossible grief of a parent watching a child suffer, unable to stop it. She had heard that sound before. She had made that sound herself, sitting beside her mother's hospital bed, watching the machines breathe for a body that had forgotten how. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Victor's eyes widened. He had expected resistance, she realized, expected her to flee, to refuse, to demand explanations she could not possibly accept. He had not expected simple compassion. "A transfusion," he said quietly. "Your blood, given directly to him. It may do nothing. It may save his life. I cannot promise anything except that I will not harm you and that I will give you whatever you ask in return." Elena looked at the boy in the bed. In the moonlight, he was beautiful too, the same terrible beauty as his father, softened by youth and illness. His face was peaceful, but beneath the peace, she sensed pain. She had become an expert in recognizing pain in the years since her mother's diagnosis. "Can I see him closer?" Victor stepped aside. She approached the bed slowly, the way one approaches a wounded animal. Up close, she could see the shadows under the boy's eyes, the translucence of his skin, the way his fingers curled slightly on the blankets as if reaching for something just out of grasp. "His name is Sebastian," Victor said from behind her. "He was born in 1931. He has spent more years dying than you have spent alive." Elena reached out, without quite knowing why, and touched Sebastian's hand. It was cold, colder than any living thing should be. But at her touch, something flickered behind his closed eyelids. A tremor passed through him, and his lips parted on a breath that might have been a word. "He feels you," Victor said, and now his voice was thick with something that might have been tears, though she could not imagine this man weeping. "Your blood calls to him. The old bond, still alive after all these centuries." Elena did not understand. She understood nothing about this strange house, this impossible man, this boy who had been dying for nearly a century. But she understood pain, she understood desperation, She understood the terrible arithmetic of sacrifice, the way you measured your own suffering against the suffering of those you loved, and chose. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll give him whatever he needs." The transfusion room was cold and white and filled with equipment that hummed with purpose. Elena lay on a bed that had been adjusted to face another bed, where Sebastian had been carefully transferred. Between them ran a web of tubes and monitors, the machinery of miracles. Dr. Frost explained the procedure in clinical terms that Elena only half understood. Direct transfusion. Careful monitoring. The blood would pass from her veins to his, and they would watch for signs of rejection or acceptance. The process would take several hours. If it worked, they would see changes within a day. "There is something else," Victor said. He had not left the room, standing in the corner like a guardian shadow. "Something you deserve to know before we begin." Elena turned her head to look at him. "What?" "You asked what we are, what my son is, what I am?" He paused, and in the pause, she felt the air change, a pressure building, a truth rising to the surface. "We are vampires, creatures of legend, immortal, cursed, monsters if you believe the stories." Elena waited for the fear to come. It should have come. Terror, disbelief, the urge to flee. But she had grown up on stories of monsters, and the monsters in those stories had never looked like grieving fathers. The monsters in those stories had never sat beside hospital beds, watching their children fade. "And my blood?" she asked. "What makes it special?" "Your ancestors, the Valdris line, were humans who lived alongside my kind centuries ago. Their blood carried properties that could heal us, cure our wounds, even reverse the effects of our curse in some cases. They were our allies, our friends, and then they were hunted, destroyed by those who feared what they represented." What did they represent? Hope. Victor's voice was barely a whisper. They represented the possibility that we were not damned. That connection between our kinds was possible. Their destruction was meant to sever that possibility forever. Elena closed her eyes. She thought of her mother, who had believed in miracles even as her body failed. She thought of all the blood she had given over the years, sold for grocery money, never knowing that it carried something precious. "Start the transfusion," she said. The first hour passed in silence. Elena watched the red line of her blood travel through the tubes, watched it disappear into Sebastian's arm. She felt lightheaded, distant, as if part of her was traveling with it, following her blood into a body that had been dying for nearly a century. Sebastian remained still. His monitors beeped their steady rhythms. Nothing changed. The second hour brought the first tremor. A slight shudder passed through Sebastian's frame, his fingers twitching on the blankets. Dr. Frost checked his readings and said nothing, but Elena saw the tension in her shoulders. "Is that good?" Elena asked. "I don't know," Dr. Frost admitted. "This is beyond anything in my experience." Victor moved closer to his son's bed. He reached out and brushed Sebastian's hair back from his forehead, the gesture unbearably tender from a man who looked like he could tear the world apart with his bare hands. "Fight," he whispered. "You have fought for 90 years. Fight a little longer." The third hour brought the storm. It began as a shiver, a trembling that spread from Sebastian's core to his extremities. Then his eyes opened, not the gradual awakening of natural sleep, but a sudden, violent snapping of lids, and he screamed. The sound was inhuman. It tore through the room like a blade, rattling the equipment, sending Dr. Frost stumbling backward. Elena tried to sit up, but she was weak from blood loss, her limbs refusing to obey. Victor was at Sebastian's side in an instant, holding him down as his body convulsed. "He's fighting it," he said through gritted teeth. "The transformation. The old blood is trying to heal him, and his body is at war with itself." "What do I do?" Elena gasped. "Nothing. You have done enough. The rest is up to him." Sebastian's screaming subsided into a low moan. His eyes, which had been gray like his father's, were flickering between colors, storm dark to gold to something that glowed faintly red. His skin was flushing, color returning where there had been only pallor. "I can feel it," he whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. "The blood. Her blood. It's singing." He turned his head toward Elena, and in that moment, their eyes met. She saw recognition there, impossible recognition, as if he knew her, as if he had always known her. "Thank you," he said. "Whoever you are, thank you." Then his eyes rolled back, and he went still. For one terrible moment, Elena thought he was dead. Then the monitors began to stabilize, one by one, settling into rhythms that sounded stronger, steadier, more alive than they had before. "It's working," Dr. Frost breathed. "God help us, it's actually working." Victor did not speak. He stood beside his son's bed, one hand on Sebastian's chest, feeling the heartbeat that had been failing for 90 years finally begin to strengthen. His eyes were closed, and on his ancient face, Elena saw something she had not expected to see. Peace. The next 3 days were a blur of blood draws and monitoring, of sleeping and waking, of watching Sebastian slowly return to something like life. Elena gave what she could, resting between donations, eating the rich food that Dr. Frost insisted on providing. She learned things in those 3 days. She learned that Victor had been born in what was now called Romania, in a castle that had long since crumbled to dust. She learned that he had been turned against his will during a war whose name had been forgotten, and had spent his first centuries as a monster before finding enough of his humanity to remember what mercy meant. She learned about Sebastian's mother, Catherine, who had been a painter in 1920s Paris, a woman with wild hair and wilder dreams who had looked at Victor and seen not a monster but a man. She had loved him despite everything, and he had loved her in return, the kind of love that defied reason and outlasted death. She knew what she was risking, Victor said on the second night as they sat in the library while Sebastian slept. Carrying a child of mixed blood, the physicians told her she would die. She chose to do it anyway. Why? Because she believed he would be worth it, and she was right. Victor's eyes drifted to the fire burning in the grate. He was worth everything, even 90 years of watching him suffer. Even the knowledge that I failed her, failed to protect what she died to create. You didn't fail, Elena said. You kept him alive. You never stopped trying to save him. I kept him in limbo, neither alive nor dead. Is that mercy or cruelty? Elena thought of her mother in the final months when the machines had breathed for her and the drugs had kept her heart beating long after her mind had gone. She thought of the decision she had finally made to let go, to allow nature to take its course. She still wasn't sure if it had been mercy or cowardice. I don't know, she admitted. I don't think anyone knows. We just do what we can and hope it's enough. Victor looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a moment she saw past the centuries of sorrow to something that might have been warmth. You are very young, he said, to be so wise. I'm not wise, I'm just tired. They are often the same thing. On the third day, Sebastian woke fully. His eyes were clear, still that shifting gray, but no longer flickering, no longer confused. His color was healthy. His heartbeat was strong. When he sat up in bed and asked for water, his voice was steady. Elena was there when he took his first steps in 90 years. She watched him cross the room to the window, moving slowly but surely, his father hovering nearby like a man afraid to breathe too loudly for fear of breaking a spell. Sebastian looked out at the forest, at the morning light filtering through the trees, and laughed. It was a small sound, rusty from disuse, but it held something that made Elena's heart ache. Joy. Pure, simple joy. I forgot, he said. I forgot what it felt like to be alive. Victor put a hand on his son's shoulder. In the daylight, he looked old despite his ageless face. Old in the way that grief makes one old, in the way that centuries of sorrow settle into the bones. Welcome back, he said. Sebastian turned to face Elena. He was taller than her. She realized now that he was standing, tall and thin and beautiful, with his father's cheekbones and his mother's eyes. You saved me, he said. I don't even know your name, and you saved me. Elena Vasquez. Elena. He said her name like it was something precious, something worth remembering. My father says you carry the old blood, the healer's blood, but that's not why you saved me, is it? No? Then why? Elena thought about the question. She thought about the blood bank, and the $40, and the endless arithmetic of survival. She thought about her mother, and the hope that had sustained them, even when hope made no sense. Because someone asked me to, she said finally. Because I could. Because that's what my mother would have done. Sebastian studied her face for a long moment. Then he smiled. A real smile, one that transformed his features from merely beautiful to radiant. I owe you a debt I can never repay, he said. But I would like to try. Will you stay? Not forever, if you don't wish it, but long enough for me to show you that your gift was not wasted. Elena looked at Victor, who was watching his son with an expression of wonder and disbelief. She looked at Sebastian, who was looking at her with something that might have been the beginning of devotion. She thought of her apartment, with its mold and its loneliness. She thought of the diner and the cleaning job and the blood bank. Yes, she said, I'll stay. In the weeks that followed, Elena learned what it meant to live in a house full of ghosts. Not literal ghosts, though the manor was old enough to have its share of restless spirits, but ghosts of memory, of loss, of all the things that Victor and Sebastian had witnessed and survived. The house was full of relics, paintings from centuries past, furniture that had survived wars, books in languages that no longer existed. Every room told a story of things lost and things endured. Sebastian grew stronger by the day. He walked the grounds with Elena, showing her the forest that had been his prison and his sanctuary for nearly a century. He told her about the world he remembered, the 1930s and 40s, the jazz music and the war, the way the air had smelled before pollution, and the way the stars had looked before city lights dimmed. Them. In return, she told him about her world, about cell phones and the internet, about streaming services and social media. She taught him to use a computer, laughing at his bewilderment, and he taught her to dance the waltz, his hands gentle on her waist. "You move like you've done this before," he said one evening, as they swayed in the empty ballroom. "My mother taught me. She used to say that everyone should know how to dance, that it was the most honest form of communication." "She sounds wise." She was. Elena's voice caught. "She died 2 years ago. Cancer. I was with her at the end." Sebastian stopped dancing. He looked at her with those eyes that had seen so much death, so much loss, and in them she saw understanding. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know what it is to lose a mother." "You don't remember her?" "No, but I remember the loss, the empty place where she should have been." He raised a hand and touched her cheek, the gesture impossibly tender. "Grief leaves marks that time cannot erase. I see them on you, the same way I see them on my father." Elena leaned into his touch. She had not been held in so long, had not been seen. "Is that why you saved me?" Sebastian asked. "Because you understood grief? Maybe, or maybe because I hoped that if I saved you the universe might balance out somehow, that all the loss might mean something. And does it?" She thought about the question. She thought about her mother, who had believed that suffering could be transformed into grace. She thought about Victor, who had spent 90 years refusing to give up on his son. She thought about herself, giving blood in a shabby clinic for grocery money, never knowing that it carried something precious. "I don't know yet," she said, "but I think it might." The truth came on a winter night, when the snow had blanketed the forest and the house was wrapped in the kind of silence that only deep cold can bring. Elena had been at the manor for 2 months. She had given blood 3 more times, smaller donations to help Sebastian's body stabilize. Each time she felt a little weaker, but also, strangely, a little more connected to this place, to these people, to the boy who looked at her like she was the sun. It was Victor who finally told her. She was in the library reading by the fire when he appeared in the doorway. He looked troubled, more troubled than usual, which was saying something for a man whose default expression was centuries of regret. "There is something I must tell you," he said, "something I should have told you before, but I was afraid." Elena set down her book. "What is it?" Victor came to sit across from her. In the firelight, he looked almost human, just a man, tired and worried, carrying a burden he no longer wanted to carry alone. "The Valdres line," he began. "I told you they were healers, allies of my kind, but I did not tell you how they came to be." "How?" "They were created, by us, by vampires." Elena felt the words land like stones in still water, sending ripples through everything she thought she understood. "Created how?" "In the old times, before the purges, there were vampires who chose not to kill, who took only what they needed and gave something in return. When they fed on a human and the human survived, sometimes the human would change, not into a vampire, but into something else, something in between. Their blood would carry traces of our power, the power to heal, to restore. They called themselves the Bridge People because they stood between our world and yours. And the Valdres line? We're the last of them, the most powerful. Their founder was a woman named Elena Valdres, who was..." Victor paused, and in the pause, Elena heard something break. "Who was my wife? Before Catherine? Before everything?" The fire crackled. Outside, the wind whispered through the frozen trees. "Your wife," Elena repeated, 1,000 years ago. She was a healer even before the blood changed her. She saw me not as a monster, but as something broken that needed to be fixed. And she fixed me in many ways. She taught me that what I was did not have to define what I became. What happened to her? She was killed. During the purges that destroyed her descendants, hunters came for us, and I was not there to protect her." Victor's voice was steady, but his hands were not. "I failed her, as I have failed everyone I have ever loved." Elena reached out and took his hand. It was cold, as Sebastian's had been, but it was shaking. "The blood I carry," she said slowly, You're saying it came from her. From Alina. Yes. Which means you are her descendant, her heir, the last of a line I thought I had lost forever. Victor looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the weight of 1,000 years pressing down. I found you by chance, Elena. A blood sample from a forgotten clinic. But there is no such thing as chance. Not in my world, not when ancient powers are involved. Elena thought about the feeling she'd had when she first touched Sebastian's hand. The recognition, the sense that something was waking up, something that had been asleep for generations. Does Sebastian know? No, I wanted to tell you first, to give you the choice of how much you want to share, and with whom. Why? Victor was silent for a long moment. Then he said, because you have given us everything, your blood, your time, your compassion. I did not want to take your secrets too. Elena looked into the fire. She thought about Alina Valdris, a healer who had loved a monster. She thought about her mother, who had believed that every life contained miracles waiting to be discovered. She thought about the blood running through her veins, carrying echoes of centuries. What does it mean, she asked, to be her heir? It means you carry her gift, the ability to heal us, the ability to bridge the gap between what we are and what we might become. Victor hesitated. It also means you may carry her. Curse. What curse? The Valdris line were long-lived, not immortal like us, but far beyond human spans. 200 years, 3, some longer if they lived carefully. He met her eyes. But they were also tied to us, to vampires. The blood that healed us also bound them. They could not live without us any more than we could live without them. The fire popped, sending sparks spiraling upward. Elena watched them dance and fade. You're saying I'm going to live for centuries, she said. Possibly. And that I'm connected to you, to Sebastian, bound. Not against your will. The bond can be broken if you choose, but if you stay with us, if you continue to share your blood, your life, the bond will deepen. You will become part of our world, for better or worse. Elena thought about her life before, the blood bank, the diner, the endless struggle to survive one more day. She thought about her mother, who had died believing that her daughter was destined for something more than survival. I don't want to go back, she said quietly, to what I was, to who I was. You don't have to, but I'm scared. She looked at Victor, at this ancient creature who had lived through horrors she could not imagine. I'm scared of what it means, to live that long, to watch everyone I love die. Victor nodded slowly. I understand. I have lived with that fear for 12 centuries. It never gets easier, but, he paused, searching for words. But it can become bearable, if you have someone to share it with, if you find meaning in the years rather than merely endurance. Is that what you found, meaning? Sometimes, Sebastian gave me meaning, Catherine did, before him, and now, he hesitated again, and in the hesitation, Elena heard something raw and honest. Now you have given me meaning again. You saved my son. You reminded me that hope was possible. Whatever you choose to do with this knowledge, I will always be grateful for that. Elena stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the snow-covered forest, silver and white under the winter stars. She thought about bridges between worlds. She thought about blood that carried centuries. She thought about a woman named Alina who had loved a monster and changed him. I want to stay, she said finally. I want to learn what it means, to be her heir, to carry her gift. I want to know who I really am. Victor rose and came to stand beside her. In the glass, their reflections overlapped, his ancient and hers young, both of them carrying burdens that should have broken them. Then stay, he said. Stay, and we will learn together. Spring came slowly to the forest, ice melting into streams, trees budding with tentative green. Sebastian's recovery was complete now. He walked and ran and laughed, his body finally freed from the prison that had held it for 90 years. But he had changed too. The decades of suffering had left marks that would never fully heal. Elena found him in the garden, one morning, sitting among the early crocuses, his face turned up to the sun. You're thinking about something sad, she said, sitting beside him. I'm thinking about time. He opened his eyes. I spent 90 years trapped between life and death, unable to feel either one. Now I can feel everything, and I don't know how to bear it. What do you feel? Joy, terror, grief, hope. He looked at her. Love. The word hung between them, fragile as the new flowers. Sebastian, I know it's complicated. I know you came here to save a stranger, not to fall in love with one, but I cannot help what I feel. You woke something in me, Elena. Something I thought had died long before my body began to fail. Elena reached out and took his hand. His skin was warmer now, almost human warm. The transformation was complete. He was fully vampire, but a vampire healed by her blood, carrying traces of her essence in every cell. "Your father told me the truth," she said, "about who I am, what I am. I know, he told me too." Sebastian's thumb traced circles on her palm. "Does it change things? I don't know. It should, shouldn't it? I'm not just a girl who donated blood anymore. I'm something else, something ancient, like you. Does that frighten you?" Elena thought about it. She thought about the centuries stretching ahead, the weight of years that she might now be fated to carry. She thought about watching everyone she knew grow old and die while she remained. "Yes," she admitted. "It terrifies me." "Good." She looked at him, surprised. "Good?" "The old ones, the vampires who have lived for millennia, they speak of a moment when fear dies, when you have lived so long that nothing can touch you anymore." Sebastian's eyes were dark and serious. "They say it feels like freedom. But I have watched my father for 90 years, and I know the truth. It is not freedom, it is death of another kind, the death of the soul. And fear keeps the soul alive. Fear, love, joy, grief, they all do. As long as you can feel them, you are still alive, even if you live forever." Elena leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. He smelled like spring, green things growing, rain on new leaves. "I'm scared to love you," she said. "I'm scared of what it will mean, of what it will cost." "I know." His arm came around her, holding her close. "But you saved me anyway. You gave your blood, your time, your heart, without knowing what would happen. That was brave. Or stupid. Sometimes they are the same thing." She laughed, and the sound surprised her. It had been so long since she had laughed. "Stay with me," Sebastian said. "Not forever, I know better than to ask for forever. But stay for now. Stay and let us learn what this is, what we are. Stay and be scared with me." Elena turned her face up to him. In the morning light, he was beautiful. Not the terrible beauty of his father, but something softer, something hopeful. "Yes," she said, "I'll stay." When their lips met, the world did not end. Stars did not fall. No ancient magic stirred. There was only warmth and breath, and the simple miracle of two souls finding each other across centuries of loss. It was enough. It was more than enough. In his study, Victor Ashworth stood at the window, watching his son and the girl who had saved him. He thought of Alina, his first wife, who had taught him what love could be. He thought of Catherine, his second, who had given him a son worth dying for. He thought of all the losses, all the grief, all the years of wandering alone through a world that had no place for creatures like him. And he thought, for the first time in centuries, that perhaps the darkness was not all there was. Perhaps light could survive, even in the deepest shadows. Perhaps hope was not foolishness, but courage. The old blood had returned. The bridge between worlds had been rebuilt. And in a garden full of spring flowers, his son was learning to love again. Victor closed his eyes and whispered a prayer to gods he had stopped believing in long ago. "Thank you," he said, "for her, for hope, for one more chance." When he opened his eyes, the garden was empty. Sebastian and Elena had gone inside, hand in hand, their laughter echoing through the halls of a house that had known too much silence. Victor smiled. It was a small thing, almost lost in the lines of his ancient face. But it was there. And in the endless arithmetic of immortality, small things were the only things that mattered. The manor settled into a new rhythm as the months passed. Elena learned the ways of the Ashworth household. The quiet hours of daylight when Victor retreated to his study and Sebastian read in the library, the long evenings when they gathered in the parlor to talk and share stories, the midnight walks through the forest when the world belonged only to them. She gave blood once a month now, small donations that kept Sebastian stable and deepened the bond between them. Each time she felt the connection grow stronger, a thread of awareness that linked her to him, to Victor, to the house itself. She could sense their moods, their presence, their heartbeats. They were becoming part of her, and she was becoming part of them. One night, as autumn painted the forest in gold and crimson, Victor called her to his study. She found him standing before a portrait she had never noticed before. A woman with dark hair and kind eyes, dressed in robes of another century. "Alina," Victor said, without turning, "your ancestor, your forebear." Elena studied the face. There was something familiar in it. The shape of the jaw, the set of the mouth. She had seen that face in her mirror, she realized. She had seen it in photographs of her mother. "She looks like me." "Yes, the resemblance is, striking." Victor finally turned. I have something for you, something that belonged to her. He held out a small wooden box, carved with symbols she did not recognize. Inside, resting on faded velvet, was a ring, silver, set with a dark red stone that seemed to glow faintly in the candlelight. This was her wedding ring, Victor said. She wore it for 300 years, until the day she died. I kept it after, could not bear to part with it. And now, he paused. Now I think it has found its rightful owner. Elena lifted the ring from its case. It was heavier than it looked, and warm, impossibly warm, as if it had been sitting in sunlight. I cannot marry you, she said softly. You know that. I know. This is not a proposal. It is a gift, a recognition of what you are, what you have become. Victor's eyes were gentle. You are Valdres now, Elena. Truly. The last of the line, the heir to everything Elena built and everything that was taken from her. This ring is your birthright. She slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. The red stone pulsed once, then settled into a steady, gentle warmth. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, Victor replied, for bringing him back to me, for bringing light into this house of shadows. They stood together in the candlelit study, two creatures bound by blood and loss, and the fragile hope that something beautiful could grow from centuries of darkness. Below them, in the garden, Sebastian was waiting. Elena found him among the autumn leaves, his face pale in the moonlight, his eyes full of questions. My father gave you her ring, he said. Yes. Then it is true, you are staying, not just for now, forever. Elena took his hand and pressed it to her chest, where her heart beat with rhythms that were no longer entirely human. Forever is a long time, she said. Ask me again in 100 years. Sebastian laughed, that beautiful, rusty laugh that still surprised her every time. I will, he promised. Every 100 years I will ask, and every 100 years I hope you will say yes. Elena looked up at the manor rising behind them, its windows glowing with warm light. She looked at Sebastian, whose eyes held all the wonder of someone seeing the world for the first time. She looked at the ring on her finger, carrying the legacy of a woman who had bridged the gap between worlds. She had come here for $40 and a desperate hope. She had found something worth infinitely more, a family, a purpose, a love that might span centuries. Yes, she said, yes, I will stay. The wind whispered through the autumn leaves, carrying secrets and promises. The moon rose over the forest, silver and ancient and wise. And in a garden full of falling leaves, two souls who should never have found each other stood hand in hand, facing an eternity they would not have to face alone. Far above, in his study, Victor watched them, and on his ancient face, worn by centuries of grief, there bloomed a smile that looked remarkably like hope. The night stretched on, endless and full of stars. And somewhere in the darkness, the old blood sang.